Gillette bought the entire radio rights to the World Series in 1939. And as I remember, it cost them $100,000, and for that they got to broadcast the Yankees, I think, versus the Reds in 1939. And think of the number of impressions they made on minds in 1939 dollars for $100,000, and they were getting into the minds of young guys like myself. I was 8 or 9, and millions of people, and they did it in those dollars then. And of course, if you were going to go out and try and have a similar impressions on millions of minds now, it costs a fortune, and part of that's due to inflation, part of it's due to other things. But it was a great investment which could be made in 1939 dollars that paid off in terms of selling razors and blades in 1960 and 1970 and 1980 dollars. So that's the kind of business you want to own. Charlie?
Well, yeah, but if the inflation ever goes completely out of control, you have no idea how it's going to end up. If it weren't for the Weimar inflation, we might never have had Adolf Hitler. It was the twosome of the great German inflation followed by the Great Depression that brought us Hitler. And think of the price that the world paid for that one. We don't want inflation because it's good for See's candy.
No, I didn't quite realize I was proposing that.
I wasn't criticizing it.
What's good for See's candy is good for the United States. This is pineapple juice, incidentally. People were questioning that. They say it's good for your throat if you're going to talk a long time.
Yes, well, of course, reputation you get over a long period of time. Very few people are like Charles Lindbergh, where you just suddenly have a great reputation. Most of us have to acquire one very slowly, and that was true in Berkshire's case. And in any individual, you just have to get the best reputation you can in the years you're allotted and the time available. And it may work out well, it may work out poorly, but it's a wise investment. I see all the time opportunities come to people where it's the credibility they've gotten in the past that causes them to have the new opportunity. So I think hardly anything is more important than behaving well as you go through life. And I think we actually try to behave better as we got more prosperous. And I think you'd be crazy if you didn't. So I certainly recommend that you follow those old-fashioned principles. And I don't think there's any way of guaranteeing a total powerhouse brand, nor can, if a result is a 1 in 50 million type result, you're probably not going to get them.
Johnny Agnelli of Fiat, back in, I think it was 1988, I was at dinner with him one time, and he said something to me that stuck with me. He said, when you get old, he says, you'll have the reputation you deserve. He said, for a while you can fool people, but he says, when he was talking about himself at the time, but he said, when you get to be my age, he says, whatever reputation you have, it's probably the one you deserve. And I think the same is true of companies. And frankly, it has helped Berkshire a whole lot, that it has gotten a reputation to be a somewhat different sort of company. I mean, I don't think we set out to do that exactly, but it has worked out that way.
Other insurers, including Travelers, have cited climate change as a risk factor that they use. Are Berkshire's models different? And if so, how?
Yeah. I've seen of course, the SEC requires you to put in all these risk factors, and the lawyers will tell you to put in, everything possibly you can think of, that you'll develop Alzheimer's or whatever it may be. I mean, they just want you to have a laundry list so that it's all been covered in case of later litigation or something of the sort. So people do put in weather risk, and maybe they put it in because they've got some model that shows it. But we price our business. Basically, we price it every year. It's not like a life insurance company. A life insurance company, you make a contract at so much 1,000, and if you buy whole life insurance, that you've set a price for. If you're 20, you may have set a price for 60 or 70 years in the future. But that is not the property casualty insurance business which we're in. We set it 1 year at a time, and I see nothing that tells me that on a yearly basis that global warming is something that should cause me to change my prices a lot, or even a small amount. That doesn't mean that it isn't a threat to humanity, or and terribly important. It just means that if I'm going to sell a 1-year insurance policy, and I'm going to sell it on a $1 billion plant, I may care enormously about the fire protection and various other kinds of protection within that plant. I may care about what's going on adjacent to that plant and all kinds of things. But I am not thinking about global warming. It does not change the situation in a material way in any 1-year period of time, in my judgment. And if I was writing a 50-year windstorm policy in Florida, I would think very hard about what global warming might do in that case to the incidence and the intensity of potential hurricanes. But I do not think it has any material effect on the likelihood of or the intensity of a hurricane in Florida or Louisiana or Texas or next year. So it is not it's not something I would put in the 10K as a threat. Charlie?
Yeah, I don't think it's totally clear what the effects of global warming will be on extremes of weather. I think there's a lot of guesswork in that field, and a lot of people like howling about calamities that are by no means sure.
Yeah, do you think, would it change your 1-year prediction as to what the rate should be?
No.
No, it wouldn't change mine either. So I don't really understand why they put that in there.
A lot of people get very invested in it. It's like a crazy ideology. It's not that global warming isn't happening, it's just that you can get so excited about it, you make all kinds of crazy extrapolations that aren't necessarily correct.
Yeah, look at it this way, Andrew. Would you change the rate for tomorrow on insurance because from the rate today for global warming? I doubt it very much. Now, would you change it for 50 years? Might very well. But I think that 1 year is much closer to 1 day than it is to 50 years in terms of focusing on that factor. So I do not want our underwriters to sit there thinking a lot about, in terms of writing a risk or the price at which to write that risk. I do not want them thinking about global warming. I want them thinking about whether there's a moral risk involved and who owns the property. That can be very significant. There used to be one fellow called Marvin the Torch, that if you insured Marvin the Torch, global warming didn't really make much difference. His building was going to go. But Marvin had a marvelous way of looking at it, though. He said, I don't burn buildings, I create vacant lots. Berkshire Hathaway Energy, we paid $35.05 per share in 1999 to buy the stock. I was at $35, and I don't change my prices. And Berkshire, and the company was then called Mid-American. They hired some investment bankers to come out from New York, and the investment bankers spent a week here doing nothing. But they felt, before they went home, they said that, you got to give us something because we're going to send a big bill. And I said, well, in that case, we'll pay $35.05, and you can say you got the last nickel out of me. But so my ambition ever since has been to have Berkshire Hathaway Energy earn $35.05 per share. It's never paid a dividend. It will probably earn about $30 a share this year, which is a great tribute to Greg and his management. But we will get the 35 or better because he will make some good deals. It's not at all analogous to the ConocoPhillips or ExxonMobil investments. As it turned out, we wrote ConocoPhillips down because we were required by the auditors to do it. We actually, by the time we got all through, we made some money in it, and we made a little money in ExxonMobil too. But we will not be buying very often oil and gas stocks, but we will. We probably haven't bought the last one. And in the end, we look at the cash, we look at available opportunities, both in investments and businesses, and we make decisions occasionally on buying something, and sometimes we change our mind. And that'll continue that way. It's been going on that way for a lot of years, and we have not distinguished ourselves at all in the oil and gas field, although we've made a little money, and we passed up one or two where we could have made a lot of money. Charlie?
Yeah, and with interest rates being so low and the dividend on ExxonMobil being as high as it was not a bad cash substitute if you think only in those terms.
Yeah, it worked out okay. There were
Yeah.
other things we could have done that were a lot better, but that's always been true, and it'll continue to be true.